I should get a paper. Just coming to get me.
Bob? All right.
Well, I physically went.
Seems it's, trenchy's not the word, but it seems like the one is just, they got one room is not finished, and it's like storerooms.
Okay, on air.
Screens.
Want to hit our button for us, Matt? Thank you. Okay, it's 5:30. We'll call the regular meeting of the Public Works and Highways Committee to order. Roll call shows that all members are present. I'll entertain approval of the minutes from January 8th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any changes or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to public comment. Anybody who would like to come up to speak on something involving Public Works?
You go. Hey, Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. Just two quick things. One is at the public safety meeting, for whatever reason, they decided to eliminate the sirens. And I'm just concerned about that, not only for people in general, not everybody has cell phones, but it seems to me, watching the various contractors and staff from Public Works around the village, they are busy working and perhaps shouldn't have their cell phones with them to be alerted by if there was some kind of a weather event. And a siren actually may penetrate into their working space. So I think that it was hasty for public safety to just arbitrarily, it seemed like, remove the funding for that particular system. And perhaps it can be something that can be taken up and discussed in general for future before it's too late and before those items get removed. And this is for considering the safety of people who work for this village, who are out there with heavy machinery and will be in the weather. Okay, so the other thing is, several months ago last year, we were in end of budget time and we were talking about possible ways of saving some money. And in the news lately, they've been talking about how fluoride is no longer something that is actually thought of as a benefit. And since the administrator said it would probably be worth about $49,000 a year, in his opinion, it wasn't an awful lot of money, but 49,000 is 49,000. And if it was something that could be removed from the utility, it would be less expenses that the utility would have. So I just would suggest that maybe someone could look into that to see if it's worth pursuing removal of fluoride from the utility system. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else who would like to make comments related to Public Works? Seeing that there is nobody else, we'll move on to unfinished business. A, discussion regarding a professional services agreement with TADDY for an update to the 2020 traffic study.
All right, this item was on last month's Public Works Committee and then was taken to Village Board as well. It was being considered along with the truck upgrade and was going to be potentially funded by the budget amendment. It ultimately wasn't funded by the budget amendment, but the members of the Village Board expressed interest in considering it further at Public Works. So we're bringing this proposal from TADDY to update the 2020 study for discussion today. The study is something that could be useful in obtaining future grants. The Highway Safety Improvement Program grant or the SISUP grant are two options that having a study like this done could help with. As of now, we still don't have a funding source identified for this. So if we wanted to do this after discussion today, we'd either have to identify a funding source or create a new project for this year in order to do it, or potentially program the money for next year. I'd be happy to talk about it further.
So this just came back for discussion, as I recall.
Yep, came back for discussion, wanted to get
Seems
your
quite-
feedback on,
Yeah.
whether or not there was interest in pursuing this.
I'm just going to speak first, and I say there's always interest in pursuing something like this. At least there is for me. But if the money's not there, we can't do it until next year. I mean, that's just my simple opinion. Now we'll open it up to my committee members. Rob?
This could save us money in the long run if we can get grants because of this.
Yeah, definitely when it comes to the Highway Safety Improvement Program, that's a grant opportunity that's available to apply to twice a year. So that opportunity will be available in the fall. We're just, I think the 15th, actually 10 days from now is the first period for 2025. There's a fall period and there will be additional application periods in 26. So the opportunity will continue to exist, I think, if we do it this year or next.
If we don't do this study this year, we're not impacting any potential grants or anything or changing any projects that we were planning on doing this year.
Right.
Yeah, so I'd share the same sentiment as Trustee Kaminsky that we don't have a source of funding. We should wait till next year, get it in the budget.
Rick?
Yeah, basically the same. It could be used to justify HSIP. So right now, if we would go out for a grant, we would use the 2020 study, is that right? And the priorities may have changed since then.
The priorities may have changed, and this came up a little bit at Village Board. That was done kind of during the start of COVID. So it's a possibility that data wouldn't be completely similar to 2020.
Definitely.
And a couple of the higher ranking intersections in the study have undergone improvements since then, or have improvements planned. So the top handful of them would come off the list, and I think there would be some reordering of the intersections. So I definitely think there's good information, and it would definitely give us a good starting point for future grant funding, whether it was this year or next year.
The relocation of Quick Trip, there was going to be some study that went on around that intersection as well. So is that happening this year? Can't remember.
Well, we're still working on an MOU with Quick Trip to define exactly how that's going to look. What staff is thinking right now is that they would conduct at some point in the near future kind of a new study for baselining what the traffic is like, and then come back after occupancy a certain period of time and do another study to capture the difference, and then assign a share based on that for the two intersections in question. So it's kind of, I know these two topics kind of came up together. They're not necessarily related, other than the intersection talked about with Quick Trip, the Maple and Lannon, may not be the village's #1 priority for improvements after we went through this.
Yeah, one intersection may be affected on this, and I share the sentiment of everyone else here that I think it's probably good to put this off another year, and then review it next year.
I might add that, I mean, if funding does suddenly appear, because it's not a lot of money, if somebody doesn't need something in the roads department or in public works, or we can revisit it, in the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, one potential source, could be the road program, and we could monitor that over the course of the year to see,
Mhm.
at the end of the year, do we feel like, there's a balance there that this could be a good use for. I'd say that's probably the best possibility in Public Works.
I do have a question about just the attachment, the TADI attachment with the crash ratings. What's the difference? I probably should know this, but what's the difference between the crash frequency rating and the crash rate ranking? Wouldn't they, you'd think they'd be kind of one and the same, but they're not.
Where are you looking?
I'm
for,
in the
Terry?
appendix on A 1.3. What page is that? Pardon?
So is that how hard you get hit?
It just struck me as like, I don't understand, you know?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, crash frequency rating versus crash rate ranking. And that's okay. I just, you know, at some point I'd just kind of like to know because it's,
Yeah, I'm not certain off the top of my head.
and then there's the slippery conditions crash ranking. Bicycle crash ranking. Yeah, I know, but what
Yeah,
about
what
those
is
two,
just,
Bob?
what exactly is the distinction between
Yeah,
crash frequency and crash
Crash
rate?
Maybe crash rate is taking everything into account, all those other crash ratings? Oh, please, enlighten us.
Good evening. Kevin Driscoll, Village Engineer. In response to your question about the frequency versus the rate, the frequency is with reference to a 5-year time span, and the rate ranking is with respect to the per million vehicles that are in that intersection.
Okay, thank you for that. No, this was just, there's no action to be taken, so.
Okay.
Okay, we will move on to new business A, approval to purchase a replacement all-in-one gate valve Turner Power Vac from Envirotech Equipment in the amount not to exceed $89,595.
So this was an item, a piece of equipment scheduled in the water utility capital improvements. It's a trailer mounted valve turner and vac. As you can see, we did get some competitive pricing from one other vendor and then reached out to a third that didn't have kind of the proper setup for us. With that in mind, we'd like to proceed with the purchase from Envirotech.
Ready?
Move approval with item A as presented.
Well, second, I have a question.
Go ahead, Bob.
So does this replace the 12-foot, 15-foot long bars that I used to turn manually to turn these things on and off?
Yeah, it's a pneumatic setup.
It's in the budget, correct?
Yes, yeah, it's a
okay.
budgeted item.
We've had a previous non-manual one for a while, right?
Yeah, there's an existing 2 pieces of equipment in the water utility that are at the end of their useful life and will be put on surplus after this piece of equipment arrives.
I'm not against it, but is this kind of it's a safer way of doing it?
Yeah,
less
absolutely.
chance of injury,
Safer for the guys, faster to get through the work. The vac can expose the valve a lot more quickly than,
Yeah.
you know, a manual process would in the past. So, yeah, all around efficiency and safety.
way to go. Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to B, approval of center and edge line striping from Washington County.
It was an annual contract again.
It's an annual contract with Washington County. I think the question came up last year about competitive pricing on this, and we have gone out in the past and found that there's really not a comparison when you go to the private sector. The prices with Washington County are good. We do the village kind of in 2 segments, like a 2-year rotation, and that map is attached. With all that said, we'd like to continue the relationship with Washington County on this and use the striping services with them for $65,000.
Ready?
I'll move. Go ahead.
My turn. I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Washington County for the pavement marking.
Second.
That question.
Go Bob.
So Matt, is this just every year we'll do this road, every year we'll do, or every other year we'll do that road? Or do we actually, kind of like the Paisley ratings we have for the roads? Do we look at the markings to see if they really do need it, or we just assume?
There's a long history with the program, and if I could pull it up here just so everybody could see it. But there's some roads that are done every year. There's some roads that are done every other year. And that's just based on historical experience with the roads and the paint. It's coming up right now.
So we don't spend time looking at the roads. We just know what's gonna be needed.
Right. The one point that we do some coordination with is the road program and any road projects that are happening.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that, we're recalculating if those roads are in or out. A decision has to be made if we're doing a big stretch of road that requires striping. Is that going to be part of the Washington County striping, or is that going to be part of the contract?
For example, Rockfield Road,
Exactly.
do you show that as being done, or it's part of your program, isn't it?
Rockfield Road is an even year, so we wouldn't be doing it, but both of those roads, Rockfield and Pleasant View, will be painted under the contract.
Yeah.
The questions, comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. C, approval of the 2025 mastic purchase from Sherwin Industries for $24,324.
So this is another annual purchase. The mastic is a crack sealer. Typically, what we do with the mastic is get out ahead of the seal coating program and do the mastic before the seal coat is applied. It's part of the Highway Department's annual operating budget. Sherwin Industries, who we're purchasing the mastic from, is the sole source supplier of the product in this area. So that's why you don't see the competitive pricing on the purchase.
Your turn.
I'll move approval of the 2025 mastic purchase from Sherwin Industries for $24,324.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Authorization for a blanket purchase order for Adapter Inc. for internal, external manhole chimney seals and extensions not to exceed $20,000.
So this item and the next couple are coming from the sewer utility, just setting up the blanket POs similar to what we did with water last month. Adapter is the manufacturer of this product, and we buy direct from them. It's possible to get the product from other vendors that we use, but there's a discount being able to go direct with them. So that's why we're requesting this authority.
And this again is being the blanket purchase order. This is an annual program. Every year
Yep.
we do this.
Yep.
Committee, whose turn is it?
I'll make a motion to approve a blanket PO to Adapter Incorporated for the amount not to exceed $20,000 for the purchase of chimney seals and extensions and period.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. E, authorization for blanket purchase order for Core and Main to purchase manhole adjusting rings and miscellaneous materials not to exceed $20,000.
So this is just a distributor of parts and materials, one of a couple, Core and Main and Ferguson, which is the next one we'll talk about. Again, this is an annual thing that's part of the sewer utility budget. Last year, we're requesting, what was the amount again?
20?
20. Last year, we spent about $16,000 with Core and Main for these supplies.
And it's more this year because,
We don't We spend whatever we're going to spend up
Okay.
to that authority, so we're not necessarily going to spend the entire $20,000. That was kind of my point.
It's
And
not like the price went up on these or anything like that. It's just.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, it's just a placeholder, and some of it depends on, conditions and breaks and that sort of thing.
Ready?
I'll move approval for blanket purchase order for Core and Main to purchase manhole adjusting rings and miscellaneous materials not to exceed 20,000.
Second. I have a question.
Go Bob.
So does the vendor hold on to this material or do we collect $20,000 of this and then we store it?
No, for the most part, Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but with Core and Main, they hold the material on site, at least the rings.
So it's not taking up space in our
Right.
new public work.
Yeah,
building.
Tiny new public works.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? We'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. F, authorization for a blanket purchase order for Ferguson Waterworks for miscellaneous manhole repair materials not to exceed $24,999.
This is essentially the same thing as Core and Main, a lot of the same supplies. One difference is a lot of the iron, the Neenah castings, and a certain type of manhole ring we do tend to get from Ferguson, but more or less the same type of materials and supplies from Core and Main.
I'll make a motion for purchase order to Ferguson Waterworks for the miscellaneous manhole repair materials to include Neenah R1661 castings, lids and pavement adjusting rings, Cretex Pro Ring PPE adjusting rings, gun grade butyl sealant, and M-1 polymer construction adhesive in the amount not to exceed $25,000.
Thank you for that thorough motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further comments or discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. G, authorization of a blanket purchase order to Enricon for material processing at the residential yard waste facility in an amount not to exceed $30,400.
So this is the fee for renting a machine to process the waste that comes in. It gets us 64 hours with the machine and an operator, and then the associated trucking to haul off any materials that we request. That's an annual thing as well.
And the 64 hours is proved to be adequate?
Yeah.
Committee?
Excuse me, I'll make a motion to approve the blanket PO to Enercon for amount not to exceed $30,400 for material processing at the residential yard waste facility.
Second.
Questions, comments?
Is this how we always have done it? Okay. What do they just grind it up and mulch it and?
Yep, we feed the machine and it grinds it and spits it out, and
They take the machine back when we're done.
take the machine back. They a certain amount of the process material gets taken off site by them, so they truck it out as well.
Is 8 days, do we always use the 8 days? Is it varies? Okay, Tim's saying yes, it
Yep.
varies.
Any further comments? We'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. H, approval of an ordinance to create municipal code, section 1.331, regarding a tree advisory board and amend section 1.215 related to village forester duties.
So the primary purpose of this ordinance that we're proposing is to create the ordinance necessary for the tree board to form. And that's what kind of the first paragraph is about. The second, with the village forester, is really just kind of cleaning up some of the language. Previously, or actually currently, it says that the village forester is responsible for a master tree plan, and then in other parts of the code, it calls it a comprehensive tree plan. So we just changed that to match and kind of cleaned up some of the details there. So if you remember, as part of the comprehensive tree plan, Public Works staff was supposed to propose the annual projects to the tree board. They would provide their advice to the Public Works and Highways Committee, and then to the village board if the contracts needed to go beyond that. One of the things with the timing on this is that if you did approve this tonight and the village board approved it at the next meeting or a future meeting, it's not likely that we're going to get a board approved in a timely enough fashion to bid the work when we'd like to bid it this year. So it may be, and we'll get your feelings on this, that we would look for approval for our tree work without the board this year, but go through the process of creating the board, and potentially like after the season, we could report to them on what we did. But it would be in place for future years. And then the board itself, as we've kind of spelled out in the ordinance, consists of 3 members. It would be a trustee, it would be a citizen, and it would be the village forester. So the idea would be that the president would nominate a trustee. The village forester de facto serves on the board, but I do think we'd have to officially appoint a village forester. We've had one kind of acting in that regard, but never appointed. And then the citizen, and I'd also, if we do approve this tonight, I'd like your feedback on what sort of process you think we should undergo to recruit a citizen to serve on the board.
Somebody with a
You
chainsaw.
sprang one on us with that.
Like that question.
I think that might be next month, Matt.
All right.
I would really want to think about that a little bit, because you're already going to have a forester who is an arborist, correct?
Yes.
But we still want to have somebody, I don't know how I want to think about that.
Yeah, and I mean, if the committee feels that, like if we were to bring our tree projects to Public Works next month and get approval for this year with the understanding that we would try to fill this board and have it ready either for a report at the end of the year or for next year's cycle, then there's no like real urgency to.
I don't feel like I want to be rushed into just throwing this together. I would rather approve this and take the correct steps.
Yeah, I'd
and
like
put
to give
together
it some
the board.
thought.
Yeah.
Not sure if a second arborist is needed on the board or it would be a layperson of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's written, it's essentially an interested citizen.
As far as the forester, we're under contract with
Wachtel.
Wachtel.
Mhm.
So wouldn't it be natural that that Wachtel person could serve as that forester?
Yes.
I don't know
Yeah.
if it could be perceived as a conflict of interest.
They don't usually perform the work though, right? They just.
They're typically a consultant, yeah. So they'll put together bids and specifications that will go to another contractor, and often they'll supervise that work in some capacity. So
Well, to me, it would make sense that that Wachtel
Yeah.
person would fill that role.
Right.
As far as a citizen person, do we have qualifications? Do they need? how is
That, we have to think about that.
Oh,
Yeah, we can't
educated.
just make a,
Does a person have to be? And
Yeah.
it could be pretty biased too, depending who you pick,
Mhm.
you know?
Yep.
And as far as a trustee, I've got some ideas who should do that. And it's not me.
I had some ideas too, and it was you.
So those were kind of my questions too. It sounds like we're going in the same direction where we just want to.
So we have to just keep this moving forward by approving this tonight.
yeah, so at a minimum, we'll if you would vote on this tonight and at least pass this to the village board, then we can keep the process moving to start creating the tree board. And we would likely bring our contracts for this year's projects to the next meeting at Public
Mhm.
Works
I understand, in order to get
to keep
the
that moving
bids
as
and,
well.
right.
I'll make a motion to recommend to the village board of the ordinance to create municipal code section 1.331 regarding the tree advisory board and amend section 1.215 related to the village forester.
Let's say anything else about our selection of these people, or that we're not going to?
Second?
Second,
Thank you. Now you can talk.
do we have to add anything as far as
The makeup,
Yeah, that we're didn't want to make a decision on that at this time. We need.
Well, if you'd like, I
check
could,
that out more.
I could bring it back as a discussion point next meeting or a future meeting.
Well, this is just to do the code, right? This doesn't tell
the
about the
code.
makeup yet.
Yeah, that was a secondary conversation I wanted to have, just to see if you had any thoughts or advice on that. But if we're allowed to proceed with the contracts, then, it's something that isn't immediate, like we don't need to resolve it
Go
tonight.
ahead, bring the contracts back and at one of our future meetings this spring, let's
I-
put some thinking into this.
I do have one other. It's not an issue, but it's something I noted in the makeup of it, and it said that the trustees and the citizen have a 2-year alternating appointment on this thing. Well, trustees' positions are 3 years. So you've always, if someone decides not to run again or something like that, you've got that disconnect. Now, it's not that big a deal because the village president can always appoint another person, but I see a little bit of a disconnect there. I also found out that there's another commission that I'm on that's run the same exact way.
All
And I
right.
didn't realize it until I looked at this and went, well, that's off. We're a 3-year term, not a 2-year.
But that's because it's a special board. They can do anything they want.
What committee is
The
that?
historic preservation's the same way.
Yeah, the language was borrowed from other committees.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Approval of a revised sanitary sewer service area.
All right, we have all the fun ones tonight.
So far, it's been fun.
This one keeps coming up and coming up.
Yeah, this has been reviewed before.
This has been reviewed before. This is actually, this whole process is about to get a birthday. And that's probably not a good thing. But we talked about this probably about a year ago and came up with an initial draft that went through the Utility Advisory Committee and Public Works and the village board. We did that. I am going to put my screen up and take just a second on this though, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Slowly connecting. All right.
Nice.
So if you remember, what we approved is this area, the Isabel Farms subdivision. We were hoping that we could exclude it and that it wouldn't run contrary to DNR guidelines and administrative rules when it comes to drawing these sorts of boundaries. So there's a little bit of a chance we forwarded the area to the DNR for a preliminary review, which took a little bit of time. And they came back and said that, no, this is a hole, and you can't have holes in your sanitary sewer service area. So we took a couple different options to the Utility Advisory Committee to have considered. And they're laid out right here. So option one that the Utility Advisory Committee just considered a couple weeks ago was that you just fill that area in. And our conversations with Sewer Pack indicate that this would be an acceptable option and it would likely get their approval and DNR approval. We had a citizen submit, or actually a member of the Utility Advisory Committee submit this plan that kind of opens the area up a little bit and excludes some of the wetland that's in here. But this is still contrary to their rules. And they call this a peninsula. And basically they said that the more we opened this up kind of in any direction, the more likely it was to seek approval. That led to staff creating this option, which just excludes a little bit more in this area.
Is that option 3 on here?
It's option 2. So the recommendation ultimately that the Utility Advisory Committee made was to approve this option 2.
Want to just go over option 3 for anybody watching?
Yeah, option 3 was this
Is that
option.
the peninsula?
Option 3 is the
Okay.
peninsula.
Gotcha.
And then option 2 opens that peninsula up a little bit. So it's no longer considered a peninsula. Sewer Pack feels that this also would pass their review as well as the DNR's.
Okay, committee?
Well, Liz, do I have to make a motion first?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for a motion from us on what option?
Yeah, a motion to select option 2 would be the recommendation from the Utility Advisory Committee.
I make a motion to select option 2.
Second.
Well,
So there were some kind of intangible impacts of going with this. One is a cost impact. The other is the perception of the property owners too. By if we had put them into it, then they get very nervous that we're forcing them to hook up to the sewers. So option 2 eliminates that issue. But the cost, am I right on that, Matt?
Well, the municipal code doesn't compel anybody to connect, regardless of,
Right, but they're still concerned because even though we tell them
there's the perception that they may have to connect, even though that's not founded.
so that goes away with option 2. But then there was a cost impact because of option 2.
Well, they all really have cost considerations. The more area that you include, the higher the capital cost we're gonna pay to MMSD. And that was one reason that we wanted to exclude the Isabel Farms subdivision originally. It's a new subdivision. They have private systems there that aren't likely to fail in the next 20 years. So including them in the area and incurring the capital cost for the ratepayers doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
So overall, we've added, I'd say with option 2 compared to what the sanitary sewer service area is now, we've added area. So the capital cost will go up, but this was an effort to try to be efficient with that.
Yeah, so it does a trivial reduction in cost. So that's a
Yep.
a little bonus for option 2. So it's a
Yep.
win-win for option 2.
we have a motion and a second?
I have a couple questions. That little point that comes into Isabel Farms,
Northwest corner. of the
yeah,
sheet.
that corner there. So you're telling me that there's a couple properties that could be in Isabel Farms could be sanitary sewer
That part?
and water. Yeah, that there, right where that
Mhm.
is.
No,
Is that where the old part meets the new part?
yeah, if I could, it's pretty clear when you pull up like an aerial, the
Yeah,
entire
I-
Isabel
I-
Farms
Yeah, okay.
is out of the area.
Okay. And then the other ones make sense, Maple Road and Lover's Lane over there, that really is the same scenario as Isabel Farms where they have their own
Mhm.
and really wouldn't hook up.
Yep, and a lot of the other adjustments were kind of technicalities. We had some areas previously that were drawn with like diagonal lines through parcels, and they don't want you to split parcels, so that led to just some slight reconfigurations like down in this area. We were crossing the town boundary here, so we notched out a little corner of the town right there. There's just little technical changes like that.
So on your SSA exhibit, map 2.1, where you're showing the additions, shouldn't that Isabel Farm area be shown as an exclusion?
That was our first proposal, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was the original. This is what we originally took to the DNR, yeah. So that was
Okay,
what I was intending to show with this.
okay. I think we had
Other comments?
Rick seconded, didn't you?
Mhm.
Yeah,
We good?
no more comments.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Discussion regarding the updated FEMA flood insurance rate maps.
Okay, so recently FEMA, DNR, Washington County updated the floodplain maps. There was a period of time where appeals were possible to that. As of this year, that initial appeal period is closed and the maps are official. If you go to the planning website, there's an overview of floodplain zoning and mapping. And then if you click here, you can actually see the maps themselves, and there's a comparison between the old maps. It says current and proposed, but now it's these are the historical maps and these are the current ones because we've changed into the new year. There were some areas where there were some significant changes. And, you know, I guess there's kind of two things associated with that. It's we could experience, or property owners could experience, higher insurance rates by the floodplain expanding onto their property. And then, one second here.
Yeah, the area just north of Mequon Road, Western Avenue, Division Road, all that, that was heavily impacted.
Yeah, I've got an exhibit here I can pull up that shows some of the most drastic changes. That's the RFP. Hang on one sec. So the other item to consider is how this affects future development for folks that might own property. So here, just scrolling through, Kevin went through, he's got a fair amount of experience with this stuff and identified some of the biggest changes. So just taking a look here. We'll get to it. Actually, Kevin, you want to come up and talk about these 4 areas?
Exhibits up, and in discussions with the Community Development Director, Retzloff, and in response to some complaints that were received, took a look at the floodplains that were proposed and put together some baseline review items where so there's 4 listed in this exhibit. The first exhibit is just to establish the backwater from the Menominee River for the tributaries, including that area at Western. So I believe that's tributary 2 is referred to in the floodplain maps that leads to the Menominee River. So looking at the hydrology and the floodplain elevation that tributary is going into, that's an important factor for the backwater analysis on how the flow for that open channel would occur. So that's one component of it. There's a second component. Keep going. For number 2 there. So that's the area at Western in the new map. And if you go to the next slide, it shows the old map. Next page. So the floodplain, the new floodplain has expanded. If we go back, yep. And looking at the hydrology, the hydrologic inputs.
That's a big expansion, isn't it?
Yes. So there's a structure in Western Avenue that is being modeled as overtopping compared to, can you go back to the other one, the old one? Where there it's not. In some preliminary analysis of the hydrology or the hydrologic analysis, it appears the hydrology may have increased, the hydrologic output may have increased by a magnitude of order. So evaluating that further and how that impacts the hydraulic model And the sizing of that structure at Western is part of what could be evaluated by the municipality. So that's included as item number 2. So based on a preliminary review from some information going from 60 CFS to 600 CFS.
And this is over how many years? Over how many years?
Well, it's a regression analysis, so it's based on stream gauges and rainfall. So the intensity and the intensity of and the frequency of rainfall events are increasing statistically.
Model's the same.
There's a hydrologic analysis, and then the hydraulic analysis, I would say, is the same. Yeah.
So it's not that there's a different version of the model that's resulting in this. Rainfall is increasing, the frequency, the intensity, that's what we're seeing here.
Right. Yep. It's right around 6 inches over, a little bit over 6 inches for a 24-hour period is what the 100-year event is modeled at.
Building my arc.
So this next one is showing a tributary to the Jefferson Ditch, which is about 4,000 feet away. And it's an elevation change of over 30 feet in an open channel ditch. And that shows the new floodplain in the Glenwood subdivision. And we go to the next slide. And that shows that channel and the old floodplain. So evaluating the validity of that and what the choke points are with respect to the drainage area and how that was modeled is item number 3 to consider. Item number 4 is along the Jefferson Ditch, extending up Division Road, up Hawthorne, in an urbanized cross section, and that approach.
My house is right there, you realize that.
Now I do.
Flood insurance.
Yeah.
And then it extends up to the Village Hall parking lot. So those are areas to consider on what role the municipality has in participating in an appeals process.
Yeah, so there's the RFP that's attached. We could have somebody look at this as a village and go through an appeal process, or this could just be something that is left up to individual residents where they have issues. So that's kind of where we're looking for some feedback on kind of the policy decision of whether the village should pursue that RFP and identify funding for that to happen, the village on behalf of its residents, or let the residents deal with their issues individually.
How many residents are affected? Approximately. The way the map is redrawn.
We've received a handful of complaints. I have not done a count
So we don't know how many homes.
at this
Were
point.
these
No.
residents
Could find out,
notified
though.
by whomever, Washington County, that they're now in floodplain?
I'd have to verify with the community development director.
Curious, because if they're complaining, somebody's telling them.
I believe
We
they
didn't.
were. I did get a few calls about my district area and up on Western Drive.
So who told them? Who
I
notified
think they
them?
got a notification.
From
I'm not
Washington.
positive, but I believe they got a notification.
From the
yeah.
county?
Yeah, Washington County held a series of meetings last summer.
And they also said it's up to the resident or the homeowner, property owner to appeal and go through an appeal process. And that's very difficult for,
Yeah, and it's time consuming. It could be costly, because you're.
What would
having
it
to-
cost us?
Well, we don't know. We'd,
Yeah.
we'd put the RFP out and see what the responses came
And
back.
I'm very confused by this. First of all, how often do they update these floodplains maps?
It's infrequently. It may be every decade, maybe every other decade.
So this one's like 10 years? we
Yeah, I
think?
believe it was a 2007 delineation was the previous mapping effort,
7,
approximately.
Okay, 15 years or so. And the weather definitely has changed in the last 15 years. I guess, what do we expect to gain from hiring somebody to come in here and take a look at these maps and say, we don't agree with your experts. We think the floodplain's smaller. How does that work? You know what I mean? How does that work?
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, is probability of
Some stuff.
getting this to change. Yeah, any success on this?
Yeah, I think the cost impact might be to that structure at Western if we end up evaluating replacement of that structure to adjust that,
Structure by structure?
adjust the flow passing through
Well, we
that
could-
structure to avoid having a backwater that it has expanded.
The structure is creating a choke point that we could alleviate by making it bigger. And as a result,
Under the road.
reduce the footprint of the,
Ah.
reduce the footprint of the floodplain.
Under the road.
Under the
there-
road on Western. I know
Based,
exactly
based
that.
on requests and interviews with staff, there's been no overtopping observed of that road.
Okay. How much, we don't know how much that would cost.
No.
Okay. Is that something you'd consider? And do
I
we
mean,
know
I-
it would really work? I mean, I have nothing but questions about this whole
You
thing.
could certainly engineer it so it would work. I guess, what you'd have to weigh is the likelihood of, these actually flooding. This is like a 100-year event that we're talking about.
Which we know happens about every 20 years now. or
But
30.
there isn't a history like, staff doesn't recall this type of flooding occurring in the village
No.
at any time in the past. So you have to balance that with, your other funding priorities.
And how many people is it benefiting versus the rest of the people who are paying for it?
Right.
That's why I would like to know how many residents are actually affected by this. I know it's a tough question, but I think it's an important answer for us to have to make a sound decision. And I guess my next question would be, let's say we hire somebody, they go house to house, whoever is affected, and they somehow manage to get some of these people out of floodplain, then their home floods. At least when you're in floodplain, you can buy flood insurance, but you're not going to have it if you're not in the floodplain. I mean, am I right? Isn't that
Well-
kind of risky?
I mean, I think the only way that you're going to get FEMA to modify their map is with like good scientific evidence that, they made a mistake, and with the data that you're bringing forward.
Could be a mistake, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a credibility thing there. I mean, to get FEMA to say, oh, we made a mistake.
I was going to say, if it sounds like you're throwing money in the wind, doesn't it?
Yeah,
With
it does
FEMA?
To me, yeah.
There's a number of other municipalities that, including the neighbor to the east in Mequon, I believe Cedarburg and Grafton have all gone through some of the evaluations where the water surface elevation of the floodplain has increased. So they've gone through and done some evaluations on that.
How'd that work out?
I'm sorry. So you're saying they hired a consultant to reevaluate
Yes.
and the result was?
It varies from municipality. I'd have to go back and research it more to give you more detail on what the outcomes.
Yeah, and
or-
I looked at a few municipalities today too, and, there's others that have chosen to do nothing and kind of let the residents, kind of fend for themselves based on issues that they have.
So we'd be spending X amount of dollars for this consultant, and just reading your job description or the work description, there's a lot there. I just see a lot of money being spent to maybe hopefully modify that floodplain line to not impact X amount of property owners, and I don't know if it's worth it, really.
And what happens if it benefits 3 out of what,
Right.
30 property owners? And we've all picked up the tab on that and we didn't really get much value for that.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
I don't know what flood insurance costs. Anybody know? Roughly?
I don't.
I don't know, but I know you have to be in a floodplain to get it and it has to come from the government.
Varies by property and,
Yeah.
and structure.
It's like thousands, hundreds, I don't know.
I don't know.
We can
But
It just seems really expensive for something that we don't, I don't have much faith that we're gonna be successful.
So we could take this back and try to quantify the number of people, or if the committee feels that,
I would be curious about that. I would be curious to figure out Even if it doesn't have to come back to a meeting, I would like to know, like, what are we talking about here? I mean, if we're talking about 150 houses, that might be different. If we're talking about 30, I'm like, whoa. So, I mean, I think I would not mind, you can never have too much information. And I had more questions on this particular topic than anything on this agenda, because it does happen only every so many years. We know the weather's changing, and we could say we haven't had that 100-year flood in a while, but this summer, it could be here. And we have to do what we can to prepare for it. They've done what they can in Washington County by saying, hey, guys, get flood insurance. You're in a floodplain, and don't build here. And so how do we close that loop and make sure that we're doing our responsible thing? And I would like to see how many homes are affected, because that would potentially make my decision different.
I wonder what happens. So let's say you're a property owner that's not currently in the floodplain, but now you are, and then you sell your home. How does that information get transferred to your title that now this property is in a floodplain?
It's part of the title review.
So the clerk or the county clerk?
I'd want to confer with the zoning administrator
Part of the title
on that.
company, that's their responsibility.
Okay. Just seems like a lot of work and a lot of money for a small benefit and no guarantee of success in it. Other than a goodwill gesture that, hey, we're trying to help you out, but I don't think FEMA is
Okay.
gonna.
This was for discussion only, correct?
Well, this coincides with item K as well,
Yeah,
right?
but this was for discussion. Jay?
Yeah, they're more or less separate items, but, yeah, I guess my question would be if you wanted it to come back for additional discussion after we know the number of residents impacted, or,
I would like that. Please do that, just at least as an update so we can all know what's going on. We should know in Public Works what's going on in our village in Public Works. So even if it's just for knowledge, I would like you to come back when you have that info. That'd be great.
all right, we can do our,
Line that we have to get back to them by or tell them we're doing our own study?
no, because we're past the initial 90-day period, it would be whenever we decided to bring an appeal forward.
So we could challenge this at any point in the future.
How do we want to handle K? Do you want to postpone it, not knowing what we're going to learn?
My
in our next
comment with
discussion?
K is that I would like to know an estimate, just a broad estimate for doing this type of work.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Could get
So we can determine, and if you're gonna look at how many people are affected, we might as well look at what the cost would be to hire a certified
Sure.
floodplain manager.
Then let me at least read what K is for anybody watching.
It's-
That's the
yeah,
next item, award of a professional services agreement from a certified floodplain manager to perform analysis and design as part of the Division Road and 2025 Road Programs Project.
Yeah, so I would treat these as separate items. And you could look at this as the village needing to hire a designer for the stormwater features related to this year's Division Road and Road Program. Because 3 of the 4 of these intersections or areas that are listed on the agenda are in the floodplain, there's certain regulatory requirements that we have to go through. And design requirements. And a couple of them in particular are pretty specific and detailed. And while we've done most of the design work for Division Road in-house, this is one aspect of design for Division Road that we would like to hire a consultant for.
So this is a separate topic, totally.
This is a separate topic.
Regarding Division Road and our construction, and that's the bids we're looking at. But it's obvious here that you then can ask them how much would it cost if we did X, Y, and Z? Once we find out how many homes, correct? You would use potentially the same party? Or at least to get pricing.
Yes.
It's possible, yes.
Okay, committee, I'm sorry.
We want to add cost to that Division Road. New box culverts in to address this issue.
We might have to.
Might have to.
Yeah, the RFP is attached and, there's kind of a step-by-step approach, but the village's initial thoughts and approach is what we're hoping to accomplish. There are if the ifs in the scope. So if, you know, as an example, the culvert extension at Wagon Trail exceeds what is it, 1/100th of
Right, if the 100-year water surface elevation is increased by over 1/100th of a foot, then that may not be approved. So that's where this evaluation of storm sewer structures is important for safety improvements. There's some steep slopes that we're looking at for some of these culverts, which are larger diameter, and there's some significant drop-offs. So by extending those slopes away from the road, we can meet our design standards for our slopes and then put safety railing on, where right now the culverts are very close to the edge of the road and have vertical elevation change where safety improvements would be beneficial.
and this is kind of a key next step for design on Division Road. So I would definitely treat it as a separate topic from the one before, and we would be looking for approval of the recommended consultants for each of the 4 projects identified here.
Okay.
We budgeted for this?
This is coming out of the road project?
This is coming out of the, well,
It's
it's
approximately
split bet-
$100,000 to do these studies.
Yep, it's split between the road program for the road program roads and then Division Road for those areas. So yes, it's budgeted money.
Yep, one project would be for the agricultural road improvement program.
Yeah.
And then 2 projects would be under the Division Road program. And then the Wagon Trail at the Jefferson Ditch would be under the road program, the annual road program project funding.
Motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Make a motion to award a professional services agreement from a certified floodplain manager to perform analysis and design as part of the Division Road and 2025 road program projects.
I'll second.
Question in the summary. So there are that many different people that were going to be working on different parts of this?
Yes,
And
there's 3 consultants.
does each specialize in certain areas? Is that?
Yeah, you can probably see that for Project B, that's probably Kapoor, if you remember, they did the public information and preliminary design on Division Road. And this is probably the most complicated of the 4. So we believe their hours are high there because they're familiar with this particular area and understand the work that they're gonna undertake. We think their familiarity with the project is a benefit there. And then the others are essentially taking the low bid.
So Project B, you've picked Kapoor because of their experience?
Because of their experience.
Yes, there's complexity in that area with utilities and the floodplain extending along the ditch that runs along on the west side of Division Road. So they have familiarity already with that and understand the complexity and have budgeted hours appropriate for it. So we're not having to bring this item back, requesting additional authorization or exceeding the budget.
Uh,
I think there'd be a discount if one consultant was doing all of it.
That's, I just don't understand why it's split up 4 ways. I hate to be totally
The-
naive here.
The timing to be able to move forward with these, so they can prioritize one project and delivering that on schedule, as
Okay.
opposed to working on one project, then completing it, working on the next
Gotcha.
project, then completing it, and taking months out, whereby distributing the workload, it can be compressed and accelerated.
sense. I would never have thought of that.
Or you could tell the consultant to do it that way. Work on all of them at the same time, find the people.
So
So I think, you know, the reality is that they only have, you know, so much staff to dedicate to this too. So,
yeah, we're looking at an accelerated time frame to try to get the the Division Road project moving forward, as well as the 2025 road program,
Mhm.
advertised in a short period of time.
So we don't have to worry about like Kapoor and R.A. Smith and them getting into like, oh, you did something wrong, now it's not hooked up correct. You know what I mean? Because it is a progressive project, isn't it, more or less, for the stormwater?
They're distinct areas.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not to worry about what I just said.
So yeah, right. What one does in one area doesn't affect
Okay.
another.
Okay.
They're separate.
Further discussion? Rick, anything? No? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Let's go through village board.
This should go through village
It
board.
will.
And but let's put it on the agenda,
Mhm.
you know, so we can
That's what I
talk,
was gonna
because
say.
anything with Division Road should probably not be on consent agenda.
Oh, you're saying put it on new
Yeah,
business?
just because it's,
Okay.
yeah, it's Division Road and it's near and dear to everybody. Moving on to L, award of the library access control project to O&W Communications for an amount not to exceed $64,640.
So these next four items are all similar. They're budgeted, well, actually, the next three anyway, are budgeted capital improvement projects related to security upgrades. This one at the library is the access control, so think like card access at the library. The budgeted amount was $55,000. There were some modifications to the scope that came up since that estimate was received. So the total is actually almost $65,000 now. Scott and the library staff worked out a way to fund the balance of that, the $9,000 plus dollars, between a couple different library accounts. So this is also a continuation of implementing the same security systems across all of our buildings. So it started as a discussion kind of amongst all the departments in the village, and included representatives from the fire department, the police department, public works. The system was then first installed in the new public works building. It's now being installed in Village Hall. And so the library is the next progression here.
Okay, committee?
I'll move approval of award the contract of the library access control to O&W Communications for an amount not to exceed $64,640.
Second.
Discussion? Bob? Nothing? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Award of library fire alarm system upgrade project to O&W Communications for an amount not to exceed $17,735.
So again, this was a capital budgeted item for 2025, which came in at the budget essentially. Same story as the security upgrades. As we move through the buildings and upgrade fire alarm systems, the idea will be to consolidate or standardize on the Simplex notifier system. So we're able to use the same vendor, do the same type of troubleshooting and so on. It's also worth noting that there are some persistent troubles with the library system currently. So it is in need of a replacement.
Okay, committee?
I'll move approval of the library fire alarm system upgrade project to O&W Communications for an amount not to exceed $17,735.
Second.
Discussion?
Matt, was this all, I mean, O&W makes sense that, you know, we're using the same contractor for all of this and place. Was this one large proposal and just split up because of the different areas here?
No, it was,
Bidding every piece of it.
yeah, they're bidding every piece of it. So the proposals are, yeah, they are attached to the agenda. So you can see the individual proposals there.
Any further discussions based on that?
Not for me, no.
No? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Similarly, award of the Village Hall Fire Alarm System Upgrade Project to O&W not to exceed $29,055.
Yeah, this is almost the exact same scenario as the library, where the current panel is the same vintage as the library. They are experiencing some troubles. It was a budgeted item, came in right at the budget, and looking to standardize with O&W and with that simplex notifier panel.
I'll make a motion to award the Village Hall Fire Alarm System Upgrade Project to O&W Communications for an amount not to exceed $29,055.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Finally, award of the Goldendale Booster Station Security System Installation to O&W Communications for $23,255.
So this is the same type of system that we are installing in the other facilities, much like, the last couple items here. This wasn't a budgeted item, but was something that was foreseen in the Goldendale Booster construction project. A lot of the conduit and space that's necessary for this system to exist are built into that facility. But we wanted to go out separate and get the proposal for O&W to do the work and match the systems in the other facilities.
And it says non-budgeted. Where's the money coming from for this?
It will come from TID8 funding, just like the booster station construction.
Okay. Ready?
Move approval of the, or award of the Goldendale Booster Station Security System Installation to O&W Communications for $23,255.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to the director's report. Matt? What are our highlights?
All right, I'll just highlight a few things here. Starting with High Point Pass design. We are at 75% on the design for High Point Pass. This is from Holy Hill Road south to the railroad, right by the truck country development, with the new Green Bay packaging facility just on the north side of Holy Hill Road. We're still working on finalizing acquisition of all the property necessary to do the construction, but are expecting that to come together very quickly here in the next couple of weeks, and get this design up to 100% with a potential bid in February and March award. Moving on, we're continuing to work on this PSC CPR inventory. There's some discrepancies, and we've had Ruckert and Milky assisting with this project. You'll probably recall from past meetings that this is a report that was due years ago. And as we're working through it, we can see pretty easily why it was avoided over that time, because it's a difficult thing when there's a big request for historical information, and then there's a discrepancy between GIS and what some of those annual reports have been in the past. So there's additional effort needed there to rectify that, but we are getting closer, and hope that in the next couple of months we'll get to the finish line on that report and can finally put that one to rest. Although it is a continuing report, so we're putting systems in place to make sure that changes are captured and identified right away. So if we ever need to submit that report again, in the case of a rate case or something like that, it's available. All right. In the water utility, we are working on putting together an RFP for well 4 generator design. That was a budgeted project in the water utility. In wastewater, Tim is doing some preliminary research on some condition assessment and coding software. It's like a camera with some AI technology that can automatically do the sewer coding, condition coding. And We're just doing some research to understand how much it costs. And we'll decide whether or not that is something that goes into a future budget. Also in the sewer utility, at the time I wrote this report, we were anticipating that the small sewer lining project that's taking place this year would be happening this week, but it got delayed, so it's actually just a couple weeks away. But that will be wrapped up by the next meeting. Winter operations, I highlighted that. We had some recent talks with the board about brine production and upfitting a truck. Scott and his team are doing a lot of work to identify kind of the metrics of what it means to distribute brine in terms of the miles of routes, adding a route for this third truck, the amount of salt it takes to produce brine, the amount of brine that we distribute over the route, so we can have like good information on the cost of a particular operation, the cost of putting brine out on one of those routes, and can make some good decisions with that stuff. And we'll continue to go down that road. I think the future for brine is that we'll be coming forward with requests to get additional equipment or upgrade existing equipment to distribute.
Is it that much better, safer than salt?
Yeah, I mean, it can be as effective or more because it's a solution that's already activated. And then it can save quite a bit too, in terms of your salt. Some communities can see their salt consumption go down by 50%. I'm not saying that'll necessarily happen here, but it's possible. And then there's environmental benefits to it as well.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I think an upside of brine also is that you can get ahead of the storm. And unlike salt, which on the higher speed roads the cars just kind of push it off the road,
Yeah.
the brine stays there. So that's kind of a side benefit.
I have another brine question. I do notice that, let's say the brine's been laid down a few times because the weather's going to be bad, and then the weather's nice, and you see cars drive and that brine powder just comes flying out and floating over everything. How good is that for the environment? Does anybody investigate that?
Well,
And
it's-
also breathing it in because it's coming through your car.
Salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think either way in the winter in Wisconsin, there's going to be a lot of salt in the environment. But I would say, it's substantially less salt with brine than it would be if we actually applied, granular salt. And another thing that Scott and his team are working on is, understanding the effects of residual salt on the road. So if there is a lot of salt that was put down anticipating a storm, that storm doesn't happen or wasn't to the magnitude we were expecting, and there is a bunch of residual, then that next time through, he can direct staff to apply salt at a lower rate.
I imagine there's research on all of this, isn't there somewhere?
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Roads Magazine or something?
research in AWA and
American
I
Public-
bet there is. Grade
American
bait.
Public Works Association, all that. Is that-
some communities really go, headlong into this and take it very seriously.
Seems like
And
every other conference I was going to, there was a speaker on brine.
Yep.
Of course, this goes back to the 30s.
Oh.
Is this sodium chloride?
Yeah.
Okay, not the magnesium or anything. Okay. I'm glad to see you're getting into the metrics of these things so that we can make decisions based on solid numbers instead of just a gut feel. So thanks for doing that.
yeah, one thing I wanted along those lines, one thing I wanted to show you, and I'll attempt to turn this into more of oh, I turned it off. Sorry, this is going a couple minutes past 6:30.
Oh, jeez.
Couple minutes.
Oh, wow, yeah, I was
Next
looking
week
at a
was good
different
with
clock.
numbers.
But this is just an example of like one of the, if it's going to come up. There we go. So this is a report that's run out of our telematics system that can give you a lot of information about, like here's a particular truck and the distance over the course of this season that it's traveled, the engine hours, the spreading distance. So, it drove 270 miles, and of that 270 miles, it was spreading 189 of those miles. And you can see the total salt that it's distributed. You can see a blast. That's just where they push a button and pump a bunch of salt out in one particular area. You can see an average rate, which they've distributed the salt. And then there's metrics down here on brine as well. So these numbers are
Great to have
direct
that.
application on brine.
It's amazing.
So this is the type of data that we're using to start to make better decisions about.
No idea that was all monitored.
Yeah,
It's called telemetry?
yeah, it's called telematics, and this system has some pretty good capabilities. I think, down the road, maybe there's some other systems that can provide even better and more accurate data. I used like this particular system in my previous job at Walworth County, and we transitioned away from it. And Scott actually, in his analysis, has found some areas where numbers don't exactly line up with like hard, like factual counts versus what the system is reporting. So there are some discrepancies, but it gives you a pretty good picture.
Is this a picture of one event,
This is the whole season.
the whole season? What happened to, what's the truck with the 0 on it? What happened?
Yeah,
to
there's a couple trucks that
7?
were out of service for different issues.
Show us too much info.
That's-
Yeah, trucks have some downtime and
Typically, the same driver stays with the same truck.
more or less.
So does any of this info, I'm sure there's better ways to apply versus other ways, and does this tell you that? And then does this info does it trickle down to a particular driver and saying, hey, you need to do this a little differently, you're doing too much, or?
I think we're at the start of a process like that. One example of, like what we did at Walworth County, you look at like your distribution rate for a storm, like supervisors asked to have salt spread at one rate, and a driver comes back and it was twice what the supervisor said. Well, and what happened, what was the condition that caused that? And that's just an opportunity to review.
That's
the
great.
program.
I think it's amazing.
Does staff kind of feel like Big Brother's watching too much?
I don't think so. I don't know. Scott, maybe you,
Doesn't
feel
say how
differently, but-
fast they're going or
we're-
anything.
yeah, it does say how fast it goes, yeah. But we're early on in like really putting together all the data related to brine and distribution and salt. So this is just an example of the type of report that we can use.
Yeah, it's good to see.
All right. I think I was almost to the end of the report.
One more, I think. Isn't there a couple on here yet?
How about the new hire?
Asset manager hiring.
Okay, well, we did hire Sharon Liu as asset manager. I think we're really fortunate to have her on board. She's got a ton of experience in GIS. She was previously with We Energies as a GIS analyst and a designer, and most recently had been at Badger Meter. She's very skilled, and I think there's good opportunity to make some good strides and potentially even save some money. And that was an outcome I wasn't necessarily anticipating, but because she's bringing a good skill set to the department, there's likely a way that we can reduce our reliance on consultants to some degree.
And when did she join us?
About 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I see that, 120. Okay. Well, you'll have to invite her to one of our meetings.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. She worked for We Energies, so that's kind of quasi-government, but the whole government thing is definitely new to her. So seeing a meeting like this and some of the process that's involved will be good, and it'll be a learning curve.
Okay.
What's her priority that you put her on?
The priority is we have to make a determination on, is the system that we're using now, the system that does it do everything we need it to do? And is it what we're going to be on, in the future? If not, then I think, we need to start planning some sort of transition. And to do that, she's got to understand what the system is capable of now, understand the needs from the gentleman in the back there, and kind of pull all that together to help make some of those decisions. But that's priority one. There's a whole bunch of like day-to-day things too that, hopefully after this first couple of weeks that she'll be able to help the department with some of those too.
Good hire.
Okay,
I lost my report somewhere.
that's
So,
okay. Next one is equipment and safety WGs.
oh, there we go. Yeah, so we've been conducting these working groups. The equipment working group is getting a full inventory of all of our fleet, assigning life cycles to the fleet. Eventually, we'll get to doing like condition ratings, and kind of planning out, what we need for the future, areas where saving or sharing between divisions is possible, identifying new equipment that might be needed. Brian is one example of that. So we're in the early phases of kind of getting our full inventory of equipment together and all the basic data in place to start doing some of that forecasting. The safety working group, it's just a representative from kind of each of the different areas in our department, and we've scheduled out some of the training that's going to take place in 2 different sessions over the course of this year. We've also implemented an every other week toolbox talk, which is just a quick safety talk before the beginning of a day, on a kind of a seasonally appropriate topic. Some of the divisions have started that and the others will be shortly. In addition, we're probably going to start a safety committee or group that will discuss kind of on an ongoing basis different safety concerns and needs for public works. All right, last couple things. There is a new report that's required of the water utility. There's this NR 854 water supply service area planning. It's a report that we'll have to put together by the end of the year. We're just kind of getting into what that report is and what that means. We do have an existing report that we think we can use heavily in order to satisfy the requirements of this report, but it's just another regulatory compliance thing that we have to track.
And why did they come up with that as another regular? Is there anything behind this specifically?
Paul, do you know any of the history?
Just somebody validating their job in government somewhere. Okay.
Paul felt he didn't fill out enough forms.
Yeah.
All
More
right.
paperwork, please. Yeah. We've had this letters of credit section on our director's report for the last couple cycles. I highlighted Heritage Park North for one particular reason. Historically, we've called it's one of the newer subdivisions. It doesn't have the top course of asphalt, and historically, the Public Works engineering has waited until about 80% of the lots are built before doing that top course. But because of the condition of the bottom course and not wanting things to degrade too much, we may call for that top course before we get to that 80%. And it could be something that is done this year. And that's why you see the letter of credit amount where it is. That's basically the amount of money needed to secure the top course installation.
Okay.
And then we already talked about material usage.
And finally, material usage report.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
Okay. And then complaints?
Complaints, did I have something highlighted? No.
Just the we had 54. Hey, they don't remove dead animals anymore, do they?
It goes to the police department, right? Heidi, you get calls occasionally for yeah.
So,
It's a contracted, yeah.
because I see them, I mean, even over Washington County when I drive to work, same animals there week after week. Yeah. Oh, that'd be bones by the time he comes by. Okay.
So I,
Um,
just real quick. So the top two calls are garbage related. Aren't they supposed to call Waste Management direct on this stuff?
Some things Waste Management is called directly, some we deal with, and Heidi probably understands that better than I do in terms of what calls.
Just come off.
I will contact Waste Management on their behalf and set up a date to have them come fix it.
Cause I called them direct when they intentionally forgot my recycle bin.
They fix me, and then I tell them.
Oh, okay.
Document them.
I do think the documentation is good. If you look at this complaint log month after month, they're always the highest or near the highest. I mean, there's a couple anomalies, but they're right up there. We do get a pretty high volume of calls related to Waste Management, but I think logging these calls is important because it is our contract. And ultimately, if we, wanted to pursue some sort of adverse action against them because of a history of service issues, we've got a little bit of data to back us up.
Well, as a customer, I had a very pleasant experience calling Waste Management and they picked it up the next day. So just a little input for you.
Okay, we are at the end of our agenda. We'll have set a meeting date for next month. And it looks like it falls, pardon me?
Same one.
It falls on the 5th, which is Ash Wednesday, 5:30. Good with everybody? Not good with you, Bob? So you're gone the whole week?
Be gone till the 16th.
Now, can you get a substitute to sit on the committee? I can't remember how that works.
Yeah, you can have someone sit in.
Yeah, let's have another board member sit in because we can't wait that long. And we don't have another, obviously, board member until the election. So this is kind of critical that we,
Jan sits in.
I think we'll go through Dean and see who sits in. Okay, and with that, it'll be 5:30 Ash Wednesday, just in case it happens to you, Jan, okay? 5:30 on the 5th, okay? We good? We'll end the meeting then at 7:02. Thank you, everyone.
Central guys. The railroad tracks. Until 7 o'clock. When 7 o'clock, they pull up and that's the first.
The first one?
First
Are
one.
they not supposed to come for some?
I was pull it out and.
I don't think you're ahead of time getting them.
Are they not allowed?
It's our rule, 7 AM.
Oh, I didn't know that.
7 AM's to kick off.
Yeah.
I think they missed mine because my neighbor was kind of close to mine and the guy kind of zoned out or figured out this up.
Just went.
Just kept going.
Probably, that's how I would be driving the garbage truck. You're like, I think I got that one.
Remember the-
I don't mean anything by it.
I mean, the old days, they were 60s, so they would walk up to your garage. And then.
Get out of here.
Grab your metal cans, take it down to the truck, dump it into the truck, take your can back into the garage and close the garage.
German town.
Well, that's how it's, everybody.
I saw it, but I'm not sure, I don't know, if they still do this in Fox Point, and I saw this about 5 years ago. You put your cans up by the house, they have like a little park. They drive up there and they put them on the back and then they drive down. Yeah, and they drive these little vehicles.
For European free wheel quick, right?
Yeah, I think they were three-wheel. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Guys, we'll see you again. Yeah, we were for weeks, right? Board meeting. We're off next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for not talking.
Thanks for all your input.
Thanks, Paul. Oh, thank you too, Kevin.
Have to go to these.